So, as I make this video, the Lionsgate Borderlands movie is set to release Friday, August 9th. And to the surprise of absolutely nobody, it sounds terrible. After a decade of production hell, miscasts, failed test screenings, reshoots, writer changes, and pretty much everything else that you wouldn't want when making a movie, critics have been describing the film as having an incoherent story, unfunny humor, and poorly developed characters. If this all sounds so bad, however, how would I do it? This is something I've slept on for a long time since a lot of the more damning announcements. I've been through tons of ideas, but I think I can narrow most of them down into a coherent, simple video. If you have your own ideas, stick around. This might be the video for you. This is my pitch for a Borderlands film. First, we need to look at all of the major things that this movie seems to be doing wrong, and figure out how not to do it. I'm gonna make this absolutely clear before we proceed. We are salvaging absolutely nothing from the Lionsgate film. Nothing about it seems workable or fixable. Drop it like the Halo Silver timeline. For one, it's just insanely obvious that this movie absolutely does not know who it's for. The first second they'll say it'll please Borderlands fans, the next they'll say it's for the newcomers. But how can this movie appeal to both fields when they make a bunch of stupid, unnecessary adaptation changes that both piss off the veteran players and confuse the newcomers? My solution? Just go with The Last of Us' approach. The same premise but with a thicker plot, less filler, that does things you can't quite do in a video game. That is how you attract an equal amount of pre-existing fans who won't be as confused about anything. Also, let's get rid of the dumbed-down PG-13 violence, and go instead with a full R rating. BL1 or even 3-level brutality and gore actually depict weapons from the games instead of giving Kevin Hart a fucking Nerf Mega Twin Shock, and definitely don't shy away from the darker elements of Borderlands, like Tannis' journal, the origins of the bandits, the corruption amongst corporations, etc. I think most of us can agree that the first game's darker tone is the most suitable for a cinematic adaptation, but it's more laid-back humor and easier pace. At that, we can also take some influence from Alex Garland's Halo screenplay, George Romero's Resident Evil screenplay, as well as another, slightly more obscure, pre-existing series of comic adaptations that just so happen to be based off of the events of Borderlands 1, Origins, Fall of Firestone, and Tannis in the Vault. This was a series of comics published by IDW, which comes pretty close to my ideal adaptation of Borderlands. It keeps the four main Vault Hunters, major characters like Tannis and Marcus, most of the important boss encounters were there. They even managed to make Claptrap an interesting and endearing character, even before the pre-sequels DLC. Unfortunately, I'm not really here to discuss major plot elements, but now that we have our main premise set in place, being a more complex version of the first game's story with less filler, let's talk about our characters. It's extremely important to get our characters right, to give them reasons to be on Pandora, and for their motivations to come into play and shift over time. I don't think it's any secret that writing-wise, the first game's Vault Hunters are pretty weak. The most we get is that Roland is a former lanceman, and that's about it. The Origins comics I mentioned earlier give some backstory to each character, but it ranges. Roland's pretty self-explanatory and probably the most complex. He's a betrayed Crimson Lance defector. It shows Lilith acquiring her powers as a young siren, Mordecai on the run from bounty hunters, and Brick as a bandit turned good. None of it's acknowledged in any game afterwards, aside from Roland killing a Lance officer, so I think it's fair to be able to pick and choose certain elements that would serve the story. Now for specific dynamics between characters, my idea is to split them up into different dynamic groups, where different characters would play off of each other in different ways. For a quick rundown, okay, I'll probably go at this in order of how much explaining it needs. Hot take incoming, Commandant Steele is not that bad. Sure, she's kind of unintimidating and on the whole not much of a character. I think she works decently enough to represent the Crimson Lance as a whole, but there's definitely some work we can do. She's the only siren in the series whose powers we don't know. So what if, say, she was the one who had Tyrene Calypso's phase leech before it was passed on to her? Maybe she uses it on Lilith to underpower her a bit. Perhaps not as much as in Borderlands 3, where she has no powers whatsoever, just to a slight degree. As for why I wanted to pair up Steele with another Atlas-related character, I thought it would be a cool idea if Lilith and Roland were the protagonist and deuteragonist, for these two characters to basically be an antithesis to, and maybe have a bit of a past with, these two main characters. Steele would have history with Lilith, and this Atlas officer would have history with Roland. As for who this character is, I don't want it to be Nox, as I think it would be nice for him to be in a maybe less than feature-length adaptation of Secret Armory. So, to draw from other named Crimson Lance characters who exist in Borderlands 1's main campaign, we'll probably go with Master McCloud. the boss you encounter at the end of the back door on the way into the Crimson Fastness. These two obviously wouldn't be the most complex villains in the world. I would be saving that energy for if, and only if, this idea is successful enough to warrant a sequel. These two would exist to represent the Crimson Lance Command hierarchy as individuals. That's all they really need to do, in my opinion. Regarding Tannis and Marcus, what I mean by them being the true main characters is that the Vault Hunters would be the ones going on the journey and experiencing the development, while these two characters would serve as the primary vessels for that story. Think of characters like Saul in Breaking Bad or the comedian in Watchmen. My idea is that Tannis would be the one who attracts the Vault Hunters, or to be more specific, to the planet through her recordings, and the main goal of the story's first quarter would be to find her. Marcus wouldn't have as much of a presence, but he'd still influence the story as a whole by providing the Vault Hunters transportation, selling weapons, possibly not just to the Vault Hunters, and of course, being the narrator. As for Mordecai and Brick being the side comedic duo, I obviously don't mean...
Finally, the man we call Brick. He's been reduced to comic relief. I am relatively unintelligent.
They will be the ones who bring a sense of lightheartedness to Pandora's blighted atmosphere, with a dynamic that I would imagine being similar to Mickey and Dutch from Halo 3 ODST. Mickey is a little more sensible in how he fights and kinda comes off like a scaredy cat, while Dutch is the heavy weapons expert who's always up close and ready for chaos.
Hurry up! If you want to do this, be my guest. But this ain't a job you want to rush.
Explain it to me again.
Like I said, instead of punching, I prefer to keep my distance from the target, pick my moment, and kill them with a single well-placed shot.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. You lost me at instead of punching.
Claptrap and Angel are the only two Hyperion-linked entities of the first game's story, and Angel is one of the examples of a game doing something that a movie can't. Since we're not going to be following Lilith's first-person perspective throughout the entire story, we'll need some creative workarounds to show that Angel still has a presence within the overall setting. Strike a good balance between the obvious and the subtle. As such, let's rip off Halo 3 ODSTs. Anyone who's played ODST should remember Virgil, the new Mombasa AI system that surveys the rookie and guides his progress while causing environmental inconveniences for the Covenant.
Open this door, traitor!
Spay and neuter your pets. All dogs must be kept on leash.
My idea is that Angel would interface into Claptrap through the satellite and pretty much do the same things that Virgil does. Lighting up road signs, causing weapon malfunctions for the bandits, etc. Claptrap as his own character doesn't need to change much to suit the movie format, and we certainly don't need a scene of him, say, shitting bullets. God, that would be so cringy. Sounds just like a joke the Gearbox would actually... Oh. As for Lilith and Roland, it's obvious how they would be the two central Vault Hunters, seeing as how in Borderlands 2 they have the most complicated dynamic of the returning playable characters. My idea is that Lilith would start off as the impulsive and self-centered one, who's primarily motivated by the Vault and is on the run from Atlas. Roland would start off his story as a lone bounty hunter, whose previous belief in the Vault was crushed by his betrayal from Atlas, who he would probably have a bit of a vendetta against. Perhaps before the inciting incident of the story, the Vault Hunters, who wouldn't have previously known each other, meet up by this point. Lilith would be the one who convinces Roland to help find the Vault, and Mordecai and Brick roll along for the payday. Then, of course, there's the siren stuff. We can't just give up on that, like the Lionsgate film seems to have, but there needs to be some drawbacks to ensure that Lilith can't just phase walk through every fight. My idea is that, 1, since we've added the element that Lilith is trying to stay away from Atlas, maybe carelessly using her powers would draw some unwanted attention to her. 2, without the iridium in question, what if we see it take a physical toll on her, like with Elle in Stranger Things? And 3, what if it's just really hard to control, as a few ideas for some early versions of Borderlands 1 infer. Just some ideas. And of course, as for how Lilith and Roland play off of each other, we should obviously build up the love-hate relationship that they have in Borderlands 2, while acting sort of like mentor figures to each other in a sense. Lilith tries to bring out some emotion in Roland, who in turn tries to humble Lilith's impulsiveness, see? So, with all of the character stuff out of the way, let's talk style. Fun part. I've seen quite a lot of people say this, and I completely agree. The Borderlands movie should have been an animated production. Obviously, with a few specific people in charge, they wouldn't do that, because they need to face the names of these actors to stroke their little egos, but we're humble fans of the series, and we don't need that shit now, do we? Anyways, if you've noticed the artwork I put in the thumbnail, that is art made by me, and I will continue putting it on screen now. Obviously, I've thought for years about these ideas, so there's some older art here that isn't very good, but should still give a good insight into the general aesthetics we bought to shoot for. Obviously, 2D animation akin to that one Red vs. Blue episode, Rip vs. Your Teeth is Killed, or those direct-to-DVD Hulk movies from around 2009 or so would probably be more within our budget as humble fans of the series. But come on, it would be fun as fuck to imagine a 3D film that looked like Arcane or Spider-Verse. Now, hold on. What was I going on about just a second ago? Bear with me, let me explain. With indie 2D animation on a steady rise... God, I hate to use Vipsy Pop as a reference. With indie 2D animation on a steady rise, I see absolutely no reason that a few dedicated fans with a good script couldn't make this movie. And if that ends up being too daunting a task, okay, split up the major plot elements into a short animated series. Whatever we can do, we need to show the power that dedicated fans have over these big budget factories. And from there, I leave it up to you. Talk about it in the comments, make your own YouTube videos, post on Reddit, Twitter, fucking Facebook if there's any real people still there. And if there's anyone out there with even the slightest interest in animation and storytelling, well, my Discord's in the description. Hit me up. This is Andrew H. saying, don't panic.